Today, I was eating breakfast as usual, just like any other day. It consisted of a donut and a cup of coffee. While I was drinking my coffee, my girlfriend entered the room, holding up today's newspaper. Hey, Tom? Yes, sweetheart? Someone died in Milky Hills Amusement Park again. I choked. Isn't that the park you used to work at? I couldn't say a word. All those horrible memories flooded back up. Slowly, I asked, which attraction? The Ferris wheel, apparently. Oh no, not again. Maybe a little backstory. 6 years ago, when I was 18, I used to have this summer job at Milky Hills Amusement Park, an amusement park owned by a cow milk farmer in Maine, USA. The farmer decided to build a small amusement park right next to his farm after he won the Powerball. He assigned a former amusement park CEO to take his place and help him run the park. After all, he still had the farm he needed to work at. He placed a variety of attractions, including a roller coaster, a wild moose roller coaster, a couple of carousels, some typical farm attractions, and of course, a Ferris wheel. The Ferris wheel was located in the back of the park, as it was added much later during the time I worked there, and didn't draw that much attention, as it was still a regular Ferris wheel, which is not the most exciting attraction in a park. We did, however, have a vast crowd, including old people, young couples, and families with small children. The Ferris wheel had 32 cabins, each labeled with a number, but, as I already said, it wasn't the most popular attraction. That's why the CEO, the farmer, and some of the more important staff decided to redecorate the entire Ferris wheel and change the formula. I was there during these meetings, as I was the main operator of the Ferris wheel. The concept the staff came up with was pretty cool, actually. Every cabin was painted black and featured big white question marks on all sides of the cabin. The numbers were removed and the windows were placed with tinted bulletproof windows. Nobody was able to look inside or outside the cabins. The next step was even more amazing. Every single cabin was assigned with a different theme and reward on the inside. What do I mean with this? For example, one cabin was dedicated to gaming. Guests who won this cabin would play video games on a PS3 and a TV that were installed inside. Another cabin was dedicated to reptiles and featured 4 terrariums with a variety of snakes and lizards. Probably the most famous cabin was the bed cabin, as the seats and floor were replaced with an enormous cozy bed. A lot of babies were made in that cabin, I can tell you that. However, there was one cabin I wasn't allowed to know what was inside. The cabin was formally marked with the number 22, hence the name. The only thing the staff told me about it was that it was the only cabin I wasn't allowed to enter or clean. I, of course, wanted to know why, but they resisted from telling me. They told me I would easily recognize it as the only cabin featuring its original number on the side, 22. As soon as the new and improved Ferris wheel opened, it took Maine by storm. It soon became the most popular attraction in the park, because guests would never know which cabin and which reward they would get. Journalists and guests themselves made lists with the themes of all the different cabins. Cabin 22, however, was never mentioned on those lists. The first death was 2 weeks after the opening of the improved Ferris wheel. I was operating it as usual when Cabin 22 entered the boarding station. I was prepared because people who entered this cabin always came out with fear in their eyes, in some state of mild shock and sometimes even puking. The cabin itself was painted pitch black on the inside, but that was probably the scariest thing about it. I never really understood all the fuss until that day. 2 weeks after the opening, the doors of the cabin opened, and a man, probably around 30 years old, left it with slow steps and that strange look of fear in his eyes. He looked at me and stared for at least 20 seconds. I was starting to get nervous. What was wrong with him? Suddenly, he pulled out a gun, put it in his mouth, screamed, "I'm sorry, Helen. I'm not strong enough," and pulled the trigger. The entire cabin was splattered with bone fragments, blood and pieces of brain. I couldn't say a word. This couldn't be happening. What the hell happened to this guy? What happened in that cabin? What did he see, hear, or feel to drive him to such a deed? The entire attraction was shut down for a week, and after the investigation, it reopened, with Cabin 22 still operational. During the investigation, it came to my ears that the guy who had ended things had a girlfriend named Helen. Helen, unfortunately, died a couple months ago due to cancer. Even though I was still shocked, I continued to operate it. As the CEO doubled my pay for the troubles I had with this attraction. 1 week later, it happened again. Cabin 22 was at the highest point when suddenly, I heard a long, loud, high-pitched scream. I looked up and saw the cabin dangling very violently like they were dancing inside that thing. A few seconds later, I heard glass shatter, and a girl, only 17 years old, jumped through the bulletproof window. She fell a couple of meters down on her head, breaking the neck and crushing the skull like an egg. Again, same procedure. Shut down. Investigation. Reopen a week later. Now with the warning for this cabin that only adults were allowed. I never knew what happened in the life of that girl to bring her to such a deed. But, yet again, 2 days after reopening, the cabin entered the boarding station. The doors opened, and no one came outside. I went over to check and started screaming. The couple that entered this cabin 20 minutes ago were lying dead on the ground. Both of them had bruises and small wounds around their necks. Again, same procedure. Conclusion, they apparently strangled each other. No further details were ever revealed. After that, I decided to quit my summer job early. The park decided to close Cabin 22 for good. Until now, years later, for Halloween. The farmer thought it would be a good idea to reopen Cabin 22 again. As an extra, you guess what happened. Someone died again on day 1. The investigation is still going. I've talked to some people a few years ago who survived the ride, and they always told me they never knew what I was talking about, denying the existence of the cabin, which is very weird if you ask me. After reading the article, the door rang. I opened it, and what do you know? It was my old boss, Mr. Smithers. Mr. Smithers was the boss of our section of the park. He was a good guy and acted firm but fair. I would often get lunch with him and some of the other co-workers. Even though I quit my job years ago, I sometimes still heard from him via Facebook or email. He's still working at the park. As he entered my house, he told me he wanted to show me something. Apparently, he found an old series of DVDs. Each DVD a full-length ride of every cabin. One of them was marked with number 22. He asked me if I wanted to see this video with him. I said yes, even though I really didn't want to. We sat down and he put the DVD on my computer. A standard ride in the Ferris wheel lasts around 20 minutes. The first 5 minutes, nothing happened. Just 2 black benches and a black interior. But then, I started to see a weird shadow on the right bench. After a minute, it took form. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was my mother, slowly cutting herself with a knife in the arms, the legs, the face. Blood started dripping all over the place. I wanted to look away, telling myself it wasn't real, but I couldn't look away. It was like my eyes were glued to the screen. Suddenly, Mr. Smithers ran to the DVD player and smashed it with his fist. The video immediately ended. Then, he ran to the kitchen, took a knife from a drawer and slit his own throat. My girlfriend, who was in tears, immediately called 911. While I was trying to stop the wound from bleeding, he didn't make it. All I can tell you is this. If you ever visit Milky Way Amusement Park in Maine, never enter Cabin 22 on the Ferris wheel, because whatever the staff did with that cabin, they did it too well.